The Villani were not warriors. They had never been warriors. In all their 3,000 years of recorded history, they had never built a weapon larger than a small knife used for cutting food. Their bodies were soft and delicate, covered in smooth blue skin that bruised easily. They had 4 eyes that could see in the dark. But those eyes were made for reading books and studying stars, not for watching enemies approach. Their home was a beautiful moon called Solaris 7. It circled a giant purple gas planet, and its skies were always painted in soft lavender colors. The Villani had built great cities there, towers made of crystal that caught the light and scattered rainbows across the streets. They were artists. They were scientists. They were traders who traveled to distant stars to exchange goods and knowledge with other peaceful species. War was something they read about in old books. It was a thing that primitive species did before they became civilized. The Villani believed that all intelligent beings would eventually learn that cooperation was better than conflict. They believed that kindness would always win in the end. They were wrong. High Chancellor Oren stood in the tall observation tower of the capital city, watching the sky change. She was old for a Villani, nearly 200 years, and she had spent her whole life serving her people. She had negotiated trade agreements with dozens of species. She had helped settle disputes between distant colonies. She had never, not once, faced a problem that could not be solved with patient words and mutual understanding. But the ships appearing in the sky were not interested in words. The Kreth Dominion had arrived. Their vessels were not like anything the Villani had seen before. They were not built from metal or crystal or any material the Villani scientists could identify. They were grown like living things, dark and twisted shapes that looked like insects frozen in mid-flight. Hundreds of them dropped through the atmosphere, blocking out the lavender sky with their terrible shadows. Oren's assistant, a young male named Tessic, rushed into the observation room. His 4 eyes were wide with fear, and his voice shook when he spoke. "High Chancellor, they are not responding to our greeting signals. We have sent messages of peace in every language we know. They do not answer." "Perhaps their communication systems are different from ours," Oren said, trying to stay calm. "Keep trying. Send mathematical sequences. Send images of friendship. Send anything that might show them we mean no harm." But even as she spoke, she watched the first Kreth ship open fire on an orbital station. The station was a research center where Villani scientists studied distant galaxies. It had no weapons. It had no shields. It simply existed to gather knowledge and share it freely with anyone who asked. The Kreth ship did not care. A beam of green energy struck the station, and it exploded in a ball of fire that was visible even from the planet's surface. 300 Villani scientists died in that moment. Their lives ended without warning, without reason, without any chance to understand why. Oren felt her legs grow weak. She grabbed the railing of the observation deck to keep herself standing. "No," she whispered. "Why? Why would they do this?" The answer came soon enough. The Kreth began broadcasting a message. And this time, the Villani translators could understand it. The voice was harsh and clicking, like stones grinding together, and it spoke words that Oren would remember for the rest of her life. "This world now belongs to the Kreth Dominion. All resources will be harvested. All inhabitants will serve or die. Resistance is not expected from prey species. This message will not repeat. Prey species. That was what they were to the Kreth, not people, not citizens of the galaxy, not potential friends or trading partners. Just prey. Animals to be hunted. Resources to be used up and thrown away." The attacks began immediately. Kreth landing ships descended on cities across the moon, and from them poured soldiers unlike anything the Villani had imagined in their worst nightmares. The Kreth were insectoid, standing on 6 legs with 2 additional arms ending in sharp claws. Their bodies were covered in hard black shells, and their faces had no expression that the Villani could read. They moved fast, so fast, and they killed without hesitation. The Villani had no army to send against them. They had no weapons to fight back. All they could do was run. Oren ordered the evacuation of the cities. Underground bunkers that had been built long ago for natural disasters became shelters for millions of terrified civilians. The Villani fled from their beautiful crystal towers, leaving behind everything they had built, everything they loved, just to survive another day. But Aura knew that the bunkers would not protect them forever. The Kreth would find them eventually. The Kreth would break through the doors and drag them out into the light. And then her people would become slaves or food or whatever else the Dominion wanted them to be. She needed, but in the deepest part of the government complex. There was a room that had not been opened in 500 years. Inside that room was a machine that the Villani had built when they first ventured into space. Back when they still believed that the universe might contain dangers they could not imagine. It was called the Emergency Beacon, and its purpose was simple. It would send a distress signal out into the void, reaching across distances that normal communications could not cross. Broadcasting a cry for help to anyone who might hear it. The Villani had never used it. They had hoped they would never need to. Orin stood before the machine, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Tessic stood beside her, along with the few council members who had managed to reach the bunker before the Kreth cut off the streets. "We do not know who will answer," said Councilmember Bryn, her voice heavy with worry. "The beacon reaches into uncharted space. We could be calling something worse than the Kreth." "What could be worse than this?" Orin asked. Above them, they could hear the distant sounds of explosions as the Kreth destroyed another district of the capital. "Our people are dying. Our cities are burning. If we do nothing, we will be erased from history. We will be forgotten, as if we never existed at all." She pressed the switch. The machine hummed to life, old systems waking up after centuries of sleep. A pulse of energy shot up through the ceiling, through the rock and soil above them, through the atmosphere, and out into space. It carried a simple message, translated into every mathematical language the Villani knew, accompanied by images of their people, their world, their suffering. "Please help us. We are dying, please." The signal traveled outward at speeds that should have been impossible, crossing light years in moments, reaching into corners of the galaxy that the Villani had never explored. It passed through empty systems and dead worlds. It passed through nebulae and asteroid fields. It kept going, searching, hoping, begging, and somewhere. In a part of space that the Galactic Council had deliberately avoided, the signal found something. It found a species that had evolved on a world. So dangerous that simply surviving childhood was an achievement. A species that had fought wars against each other for thousands of years before, learning to fight together. A species that had looked up at the stars and seen not just wonder, but challenge. The signal found humanity, and humanity answered. High Chancellor Orin did not know what she had just done. She did not know that she had just changed the history of the galaxy forever. She only knew that she had done the only thing she could do. She had called for help. Now, all she could do was wait, and pray that whatever came would be better than what was already here. The signal traveled for 17 hours before it reached the edge of human-controlled space. It passed through a sensor station on a small asteroid, where a young technician named Marcus Chen was working the night shift alone. He was tired and bored, watching screens that almost never showed anything interesting. Most signals that came through were just background noise from distant stars or automated messages from cargo ships. This signal was different. Marcus sat up straight when he saw the patterns on his screen. The signal was clearly artificial, clearly intentional, and clearly desperate. His translation software struggled with it at first, but the mathematical components were universal. Numbers were numbers, no matter what species sent them. When the images came through, Marcus felt his blood run cold. He saw cities burning. He saw creatures that looked like giant insects, tearing through streets filled with running civilians. He saw blue-skinned beings with 4 eyes, gentle-looking people who seemed to have no way to defend themselves. And he heard the message, broken and distorted but still understandable. "Please help us. We are dying. Please." Marcus did not hesitate. He forwarded the signal up the chain of command, flagging it with the highest priority rating he was allowed to use. Then he sat back and waited, his heart beating fast. Wondering if anyone would care about a cry for help from a species that humanity had never met, He did not have to wait long. Admiral Helena Vasquez received the signal aboard the UES Retribution, the flagship of humanity's third expeditionary fleet. The Retribution was a massive warship, 3 kilometers long, built for one purpose and one purpose only. It was a weapon, the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created. And Helena had commanded it for 15 years. She was not a soft woman. Her face was marked with scars from battles she had fought on distant worlds. Her eyes were cold and calculating, always watching, always thinking 3 steps ahead of her enemies. She had killed more beings than she could count, and she had lost friends and soldiers in numbers that still haunted her dreams. But when she watched the distress signal, something changed in those cold eyes. Where did this come from? She asked her communications officer. Uncharted Space Admiral. Sector 7G, beyond the border of Galactic Council territory. We have no records of any species in that area. The Council probably knows they exist, Helena said. They know about a lot of species they don't bother to tell us about. They think we're too dangerous to be trusted with information. The blue-skinned aliens, the insect creatures attacking them, the burning cities and the terrified civilians. Do we know anything about the attackers? She asked her intelligence officer. A thin man named Lieutenant Park pulled up what little information they had. Based on the visual data, they matched descriptions of a species called the Kreth Dominion. Aggressive, expansionist, known for conquering smaller species and using them as labor or food sources. The Galactic Council has been avoiding them for centuries. Avoiding them, Helena repeated, her voice flat. Not stopping them. Not protecting anyone from them. Just avoiding them. That's correct, Admiral. Helena stood in silence for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited, knowing better than to interrupt when their admiral was thinking. The humans had a complicated relationship with the rest of the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 80 years ago, which made them very young compared to most spacefaring species. The Galactic Council had contacted them almost immediately, not to welcome them, but to warn them. Earth was classified as a death world. The Council had explained this, in terms that were meant to be scientific, but felt like insults. Earth had gravity that would crush most species. Its temperature swings were extreme enough to kill unprotected beings. Its atmosphere contained oxygen, a gas that was corrosive and toxic to many forms of life. Its surface was covered with predators, from great sharks in the oceans to packs of wolves on land, to microscopic bacteria that could destroy a being. From the inside, and then there were the humans. Themselves, the Council's diplomats, had studied human history and been horrified by what they found. Wars that killed millions. Weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. A species that had nearly driven itself to extinction multiple times and somehow survived each disaster to become stronger. You are too aggressive, the Council had told humanity. Too violent. Too unpredictable. We will trade with you from a distance, but you must stay in your own space. You must not spread your chaos to the rest of the galaxy, humanity had agreed, mostly because they were too busy exploring their own corner of space to argue. But Helena had always known that someday they would have to make a choice. Someday they would have to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. That day had come. Navigation, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. How long would it take us to reach the source of that signal? At maximum speed, approximately 42 hours, Admiral. And what forces do we have available in this sector? The full Third Fleet, Admiral. 37 combat vessels, including this one, plus support ships, troop transports, and medical frigates. Helena nodded slowly. She looked around at her crew, seeing the question in their eyes. They were waiting for her decision. They would follow her wherever she led, even into unknown space. Even against an enemy they had never faced. That was what it meant to be human. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered. All captains, all crews. The communications officer made it happen, and suddenly Helena was speaking to thousands of soldiers scattered across dozens of vessels. This is Admiral Vasquez, she said. By now, you have all seen the distress signal we received. A species we have never met is being attacked by an enemy that wants to enslave or destroy them. The Galactic Council has done nothing to help. They have decided that these people are not worth saving." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I disagree. I think every species that wants to live in peace deserves a chance to survive. I think the strong have a duty to protect the weak. And I think that if we ignore this signal, if we turn away and pretend we never heard it, then we are no better than the council that abandoned these people." Her voice hardened. "We are going. All of us. Every ship, every soldier, every gun we have. We are going to find these people, and we are going to save them. And anyone who tries to stop us is going to learn why the galaxy calls our planet a death world." She cut the transmission. "Navigation," she said quietly. "Set course for Solaris 7, maximum speed." "Yes, Admiral." The Retribution's engines roared to life, and the greatest warship humanity had ever built began to move. Behind it, 36 other vessels fell into formation. Their weapons powered up, their crews preparing for battle. The Kreth Dominion had never faced humans before. They had conquered dozens of species, crushed hundreds of worlds, and never met anything that could challenge them. That was about to change. Somewhere in uncharted space, a species of gentle blue beings huddled in underground bunkers, praying for help they did not believe would come. Help was coming, and it was bringing warships. Hi, Chancellor Orin had not slept in 3 days. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her cities burning. She heard the screams of her people. She felt the ground shake as Kreth weapons destroyed another building, another home, another life. The bunkers were holding, but barely. The Kreth had found several of the smaller shelters and broken through, dragging out everyone inside. Orin did not know what happened to those people after they were taken. She did not want to know. The main government bunker was deeper than the others, protected by thick layers of rock and metal that the Villani had installed centuries ago. It had enough food and water to last for months, but time was running out. The Kreth were systematic. They were patient. They would find this bunker eventually, just like they had found all the others. Orin sat in the command center, surrounded by screens that showed her things she did not want to see. Kreth soldiers patrolling the ruins of her capital city. Kreth ships hovering above the planet, blocking out the lavender sky. Kreth commanders gathering Villani prisoners into long lines, sorting them for purposes that made Orin feel sick to imagine. "Hi, Chancellor," Tessic said softly, approaching her chair. "You should rest. You cannot help anyone if you collapse." "I cannot rest," Orin replied. "Not while my people suffer. Not while there is still a chance that someone heard our signal." She knew it was a small chance. The signal had been sent into uncharted space, toward regions that even the Galactic Council avoided. What kind of species would live in such places? What kind of beings would choose to exist so far from civilization? She was about to find out. One of the sensor operators suddenly made a sound, a strange noise that Orin had never heard before. It was somewhere between a gasp and a cry, and when Orin looked at him, she saw that all 4 of his eyes were wide with shock. "Hi, Chancellor," he said, his voice shaking. "Ships. Many ships. They just appeared from subspace on the edge of our system." "Kreth reinforcements?" Orin asked, feeling her heart sink. "No, High Chancellor. These ships are different. We have never seen designs like this before. They are made of metal. They are covered in armor, and they are armed with weapons that our sensors cannot fully identify." Orin stood up and walked to the sensor station. She looked at the display, trying to understand what she was seeing. The ships were angular and sharp, like predators made of steel. They moved in tight formation, each one perfectly positioned relative to the others. And they were fast, faster than anything the Villani had ever built. "How many?" she asked. 37 vessels, High Chancellor. The largest one is almost 3 kilometers long. 3 kilometers. That was bigger than the Kreth command carrier. That was bigger than anything Orin had ever seen. "Are they responding to communications?" she asked. "Yes, High Chancellor. They are broadcasting a message." Translating now. The command center fell silent as the translation software worked. Then a voice came through the speakers, a voice that sounded like nothing the Villani had ever heard. It was firm and confident, with an undertone of something that Orin could not identify. Later, she would learn that the sound was controlled anger. "This is Admiral Helena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. Please identify yourself and provide tactical information about the enemy forces." Orin felt her legs grow weak again, but this time it was from relief, not fear. Someone had come. Someone had actually come. She rushed to the communication console and opened a channel. "This is High Chancellor Orin of the Villani people. Thank you. Thank you for coming. The enemy is called the Kreth Dominion. They arrived 4 days ago and began attacking without warning. We have no military forces. We have no weapons. They have conquered most of our moon and taken many of our people prisoner." There was a pause on the other end. Then Admiral Vasquez spoke again, and her voice was colder now. "Understood, High Chancellor. How many Kreth ships are in your system?" "Approximately 200 vessels, plus their command carrier." Another pause. 200, Vasquez repeated. "That's a lot of bugs." Orin did not understand the word bugs, but she could hear something in the Admiral's voice that surprised her. The human did not sound worried. She did not sound afraid. She sounded almost excited. Admiral Orin said carefully, "You have only 37 ships. The Kreth outnumber you more than 5 to 1. Perhaps you should call for reinforcements before engaging them." The response came with what sounded like a short laugh. "Chancellor, I appreciate your concern. But where we come from, those are good odds." Before Orin could respond, the Kreth fleet began to move. They had detected the human ships, and they were reacting exactly as the Kreth always reacted to intruders. They attacked. The Kreth command carrier broadcast a warning to the human fleet. The translation software rendered it into words that RNN understood all too well. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Kreth territory. Surrender immediately and you will be processed for labor assignments. Resist and you will be destroyed. This is your only warning." Admiral Vasquez's response was broadcast on all frequencies, loud enough for everyone in the system to hear. "This is Admiral Vasquez to the Kreth commander. You have attacked a civilian population. You have killed innocent people. You have taken prisoners. Under the laws of the United Earth government, these are crimes against sentient life. You have 30 seconds to release all prisoners, withdraw your forces from this system, and surrender unconditionally. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet." The Kreth commander responded with what sounded like laughter, a clicking, grinding noise that made Orin shiver. "You threaten us with 37 ships? We are the Kreth Dominion. We have conquered 100 worlds. We do not surrender to prey species." 30 seconds, Vasquez repeated calmly. "The clock is ticking." Orin watched her sensors, unable to believe what she was seeing. The human fleet had not moved. They were just sitting there, waiting while 200 Kreth ships formed up for an attack run. It was suicide. It had to be suicide. No one could fight those odds and win. The 30 seconds ended. The Kreth fired first, launching a massive volley of acid torpedoes at the human flagship. The weapons were designed to eat through hull plating, to dissolve ships from the outside in. They had destroyed hundreds of vessels from dozens of species. The torpedoes hit the Retribution's shields and vanished in a flash of blue light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the human fleet opened fire. Orin had never seen weapons like these. The Villani had built observatories to study distant stars, and now those observatories recorded the death of an empire. Human ships fired kinetic rounds. Simple metal projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds. The rounds hit Kreth bioships and passed straight through them. Leaving holes that vented atmosphere and bodies into space, human ships fired energy. Weapons that burned through Kreth, armor like sunlight through paper. Human ships fired missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads, each one seeking a different target. Human ships fired, and Kreth ships died. And through it all, the humans kept talking. Their communications channels were open, and Orin could hear them speaking to each other. They were not screaming in fear. They were not crying for mercy. They were laughing. They were joking. They were playing music, loud and aggressive sounds that pounded through the void like the heartbeat of a giant. The Kreth tried to fight back. They launched more torpedoes. They sent waves of fighters. They rammed their ships directly into human vessels, hoping to cause damage through sheer mass. Nothing worked in less than an hour. The Kreth fleet was reduced to scattered debris. Only the command carrier remained, surrounded by human warships, its weapons disabled, its engines dead. Admiral Vasquez's voice came through the communication system one more time. Kreth commander, your fleet is destroyed. Your weapons are offline. You have 1 minute to release all prisoners and surrender your vessel. This is not a negotiation. The Kreth commander did not respond. 59 seconds later, the command carrier exploded. Orin stared at her screens, trying to understand what had just happened. 4 days ago, the Kreth Dominion had arrived with an overwhelming force. They had conquered her world. They had taken her people. They had seemed unstoppable, and now they were gone. The humans had destroyed them. 37 ships against 200, and the humans had won. It was not even close. In the bunker, surrounded by her surviving council members, High Chancellor Orin began to cry. She did not know if she was crying from relief or from fear, because she had just seen what a death world could do, and she realized that she had absolutely no idea what would happen next. The space battle was over, but the war was not finished. 40,000 Kreth soldiers were still on the surface of Solaris 7, scattered across cities and installations they had captured. They held thousands of Volani prisoners. They had dug into defensive positions, expecting reinforcements that would never come. Admiral Vasquez looked at the tactical display showing the moon below. Her intelligence officers had mapped out every Kreth position, every prison camp, every fortified location. It was a complicated picture, made more complicated by the presence of civilian prisoners who could not be safely targeted. We can't just bomb them from orbit, said Colonel James Wright, commander of the Marine forces aboard the Retribution. Too many civilians mixed in with the enemy positions. I know, Vasquez replied. That's why we're going down there. Wright smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. My Marines have been waiting for this, Admiral. We've trained for urban combat, close quarters, building by building. It's messy work, but we're good at messy work. How many soldiers do we have available? 12,000 Marines spread across the fleet, plus another 3,000 support personnel who can hold secured areas. Vasquez nodded. The Kreth outnumber us almost 3 to 1. With respect, Admiral, that doesn't worry me. The Kreth have numbers. We have better training, better equipment, and better motivation. Those bugs have been bullying peaceful species for centuries. They've never faced anyone who could fight back. Today they're going to learn what that feels like. The assault began at dawn. Local time. Human dropships descended through the lavender sky, their engines screaming as they dove toward the planet's surface. The Kreth fired anti-aircraft weapons at them. But the dropships were fast and armored, designed to survive exactly this kind of fire. Some were hit. Some went down in flames. But most of them made it through. Marines poured out onto the streets of Volani cities, clad in powered armor that made them stronger, faster, tougher than any unaugmented human could ever be. Each suit was a weapon in itself, equipped with targeting systems that could track hundreds of enemies at once, communication systems that kept every soldier connected to every other soldier, and medical systems that could stabilize even serious wounds. The Kreth fought back. They had conquered many worlds and faced many species, and they had developed tactics that worked against most opponents. They used their numbers to swarm enemies. They used their claws to tear through armor. They used their acid spit to dissolve equipment and flesh, but they had never fought humans. Private first. Class Maria Santos was 19 years old. She had grown up in a small town in Brazil, joined the military to pay for university, and ended up assigned to the 3rd Fleet as a rifleman. She had never been in real combat before today. Now she crouched behind a destroyed vehicle. Her rifle in her hands, watching a squad of Kreth soldiers advance down the street, toward her position. There were 8 of them, each one standing 2 meters tall on 6 legs. Their claws clicking against the crystal pavement. Maria was afraid. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her helmet. But she had been trained for this. She had spent months learning how to fight, how to shoot, how to survive, and she had something that no amount of training could provide. She had anger. These creatures had attacked innocent people. They had killed civilians who had never done anything to harm anyone. They had taken prisoners and treated them like animals. And now they were walking toward her like they owned the universe. Like nothing could ever challenge them, Maria raised her rifle and fired. The first Kreth went down with a hole in its chest. The others scattered, trying to find cover, but there was no cover that could protect them from human weapons. Maria kept firing, each shot precise, each bullet finding its target. Around her, other Marines did the same, pouring fire into the Kreth formation until nothing was left standing. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Human squads moved through streets and buildings, clearing out Kreth positions one by one. They used grenades to break fortified points. They used heavy weapons to destroy vehicles and gun emplacements. They used their own bodies as shields to protect the Volani prisoners they found. The Kreth were not cowards. They fought hard, and they killed humans when they could. But they were facing something they had never experienced before. They were facing a species that did not run, a species that did not surrender, a species that seemed to get stronger the harder the fight became in the underground bunker. High Chancellor Oren watched the battle through cameras that still functioned in some parts of the city. She saw human soldiers advancing through streets she had walked her entire life. She saw them taking fire and returning it with devastating accuracy. She saw them dying, sometimes cut down by Kreth claws or acid, but others immediately moved to fill the gaps. And she saw something else. Something that made no sense to her. The humans were helping. When they found Volani prisoners, they did not just free them and move on. They stopped to check for injuries. They gave food and water to those who needed it. They called in medical teams to treat the wounded using supplies and equipment that could have been saved for their own soldiers. One camera showed a human medic, a young woman with red hair visible through her helmet visor, kneeling beside an injured Volani child. The medic was applying some kind of healing device to the child's wounded arm, speaking softly, even though the Volani child probably could not understand her words. Nearby, other Marines had formed a protective circle around them. Guns pointed outward, ready to defend against any Kreth who might approach. "Why are they doing this?" Tessic asked, standing beside Oren. "They do not know us. They have no obligation to help us. Why do they risk their lives for our children?" Oren shook her head. She did not have an answer. The battle lasted 18 hours. By the end, every Kreth position had been cleared. Some Kreth had surrendered, dropping their weapons and lying on the ground when human soldiers surrounded them. Others had fought to the death, refusing to accept defeat even when it was obvious that they had lost. 12,000 human Marines had landed on Solaris 7. 1,700 of them did not survive the day, but 40,000 Kreth soldiers were dead, captured, or scattered into the wilderness, where they would eventually be hunted down. And more than 50,000 Volani prisoners were free. Admiral Vasquez landed on the planet's surface as the sun was setting. Her dropship touched down in what had been the main plaza of the capital city, a place that had once been filled with Volani going about their daily lives. Now it was filled with rubble and wreckage, the crystal towers shattered, the rainbow lights extinguished. Colonel Wright met her as she stepped off the ship. His armor was scorched and dented, evidence of the fighting he had been part of. Was blood on his visor, though it was impossible to tell if it was human or Kreth. "It's done, Admiral," he said. "The planet is secure." Skez looked around at the destruction. "What about the prisoners?" "All freed. Medical teams are treating the wounded. We've set up food distribution points and temporary shelters. The Volani leadership is requesting a meeting with you." Vasquez nodded. "Take me to them." She found High Chancellor Oren in the remains of a government building, surrounded by other Volani officials who looked like they had not slept in days. When Vasquez entered the room, every Volani turned. To her, and she saw expressions she could not fully read. Fear, yes, but also something else. Wonder, perhaps, or disbelief. Orin stepped forward, her 4 eyes fixed on the human admiral. "You came," she said simply. "You heard our signal, and you came. Your soldiers fought and died for people they had never met." She paused, struggling to find words. "Why?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer than it had been during the battle. "Because where we come from, we believe that people matter. All people, not just the strong ones. Not just the ones who can fight back. Everyone." She paused. "We've made a lot of mistakes as a species. We've hurt each other in ways that I'm not proud of. But we've also learned that the only way to build something better is to help each other. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs us something." She met Orin's eyes. "You asked for help. We had the ability to give it. That's all the reason we needed." Orin stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she bowed her head in a gesture of respect that was older than her civilization. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Outside, the sun set on a world that had been saved by monsters from a death world. Monsters who turned out to be something else entirely. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species with access to interstellar communication knew what had happened at Solora 7. They knew that the Kreth Dominion, feared conquerors of dozens of worlds, had been destroyed by a fleet 1/5 their size. They knew that the destroyers were humans, the Deathworld species that the Galactic Council had warned everyone to avoid. And they knew that the humans had done it to save strangers. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting at their headquarters on the ancient station called Unity. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, a vast dome designed to hold beings of every shape and size. The atmosphere was tense. Fear hung in the air like a physical presence. Ambassador Thrin of the Collective spoke first. The Collective were a hive-minded species, billions of individuals sharing a single consciousness. They had existed for 1,000,000 years and had never seen anything like the footage that was now playing on screens throughout the hall. "The humans destroyed 200 ships in less than 1 standard hour," Thrin said, his multiple voices speaking in perfect unison. "They lost 12 vessels in the engagement. They then landed ground forces and defeated an army that outnumbered them 3-1. This is not merely impressive. This is terrifying." Elder Krath of the Dominion survivors rose next. He was one of the few Kreth who had escaped the battle, fleeing in a small ship before the human fleet closed its trap. His hard shell was cracked. In several places, evidence of wounds that had not fully healed. "The humans are animals," he clicked, his voice filled with hatred and fear. "They fight without mercy. They show no respect for superior numbers. They attacked our soldiers with a fury that we have never encountered. This species must be destroyed before they destroy us all." A murmur ran through the assembly. Many representatives nodded in agreement. The humans were dangerous. The humans were unpredictable. Perhaps the Council should have dealt with them years ago, when they first emerged from their death world. Then a new voice spoke, one that silenced the murmurs instantly. "You are all fools." High Chancellor Orin stood at the podium reserved for visiting dignitaries. She had traveled to Unity specifically for this meeting, leaving her recovering world behind because she felt that the galaxy needed to hear what she had to say. "I have seen the humans up close," she continued. "I have watched them fight. I have watched them die. And I have watched them do something that none of you have ever done." She looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of representatives who had ignored her species for centuries. "When the Kreth attacked my world, we sent distress signals to everyone. We begged for help. We pleaded with every species we had ever traded with, every government we had ever dealt with. Do you know how many responded? Silence. None of you. Not one ship, not one soldier, not even a message of sympathy. You knew what was happening to us, and you chose to do nothing." She pointed at the screen, still showing footage of the battle. "The humans did not know us. They'd never met us. They had no treaties with us, no trade agreements, no reason to care whether we lived or died. But they heard our signal, and they came. They crossed uncharted space in less than 2 days. They fought an enemy that outnumbered them 5-1. They lost over 1,000 soldiers, saving people who were complete strangers to them. Oren's voice grew stronger. And after the battle was over, they stayed. Their medics treated our wounded. Their engineers helped rebuild our power systems. Their soldiers shared their food with our hungry children. They asked for nothing in return. Not payment, not territory, not even thanks. She turned to face Elder Krath directly. Call them animals? You say they fight without mercy?
I
Watched a human soldier die protecting a Villani child he had never met. I watched human medics work through the night to save Villani lives. I watched Admiral Vasquez kneel before me and tell me that people matter, all people, and that helping those who need help is the only way to build something better. Oren's 4 eyes were wet with tears. That is not the behavior of animals. That is the behavior of heroes. The assembly hall erupted in noise. Some representatives shouted in anger. Others called for order. A few simply sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. Ambassador Thrin raised his multiple hands for quiet. When the noise finally died down, he spoke carefully. High Chancellor Oren, you make a compelling argument. But you must understand our concern. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities far beyond what we expected. If they chose to attack the Council, they could cause tremendous damage, could they? Oren asked. Perhaps, but consider this. The humans have had interstellar travel for 80 years. In that time, they have built a military force that can defeat the Kreth Dominion. If they wanted to conquer, if they wanted to destroy, do you think they would have waited this long? She shook her head. The humans are not your enemy. They never were. They're something far more unusual. They're protectors. They're guardians. They are the species that runs toward danger while everyone else runs away. Far from Unity Station, on the recovering world of Solaris 7, Admiral Helena Vasquez stood in a garden that had just been planted.
Oh.
The garden was a memorial for the soldiers who had died in the battle, humans and Villani together. Each grave was marked with a crystal flower, the same kind of flowers that the Villani had used to decorate their cities before the invasion. Colonel Wright stood beside her, watching as Villani civilians moved through the garden, leaving offerings at the human graves. They've been coming all day, Wright said quietly. They bring food, flowers, small tokens. They stand at the graves and speak words that I don't understand. But I think they're saying thank you, Vasquez nodded. She did not trust her voice. A young Villani child approached them. A girl who could not have been more than 10 years old by human standards. She held a small crystal flower in her hands, and she offered it to Vasquez with a shy smile. The Admiral knelt down so she was at eye level with the child. She accepted the flower gently, handling it as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. Thank you, she said softly. The child said something in her own language, words that Vasquez did not understand. But the translator in her ear rendered them clearly enough. Thank you for coming. Thank you for saving us. You are good monsters. Vasquez felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away, but not before Wright noticed. Good monsters, he repeated quietly. I think I like that. Vasquez stood up, still holding the flower. She looked out across the garden, at the graves of her soldiers, at the Villani who had come to honor them, at the crystal towers being rebuilt in the distance. We didn't come here to be heroes, she said. We came because it was the right thing to do, because someone was hurting and we could help. She turned to Wright. But if the galaxy wants to call us monsters, I suppose that's fine. As long as they remember what kind of monsters we are. Back on Unity Station, the debate continued for hours. Some species argued that the humans should be contained, controlled, watched carefully for any signs of aggression. Others suggested that perhaps the Council should reconsider its policies toward the Deathworlders. In the end, they reached no conclusion. The Council was not ready to welcome humanity fully, but they were no longer willing to treat them as pariahs either. A new era had begun, one where the galaxy would have to learn to live with a species that had proven it could destroy entire fleets, but chose instead to save strangers. On Solaris 7, the sun rose on a new day. Villani children played in streets that had been rubbled just weeks before. Human soldiers worked alongside Volani workers, rebuilding what had been destroyed. Somewhere, a human medic was teaching Volani doctors how to use equipment that could save lives that would otherwise be lost. And in the cold darkness of space, human ships continued their patrols, their sensors listening for signals, their crews ready to respond, because somewhere out there, someone might need help. And when the call came, the Deathworlders would answer. They always would, not because they were monsters, but because they were human, and humans take care of each other. Even when each other is a stranger with blue skin and 4 eyes, living on a moon they had never heard of, in a part of space they had never explored. That was who they were. That was who they would always be. The good monsters, the guardians of the galaxy, the ones who came when no one else would, the humans